Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to this meeting of the Constitution and Ethics Committee of Cambridgeshire County Council. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, however, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for the rest of today. So if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit, which is through the middle doors on my left, and assemble in the car park. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Seif to his first meeting of the Constitution and Ethics Committee. Welcome. And of course, to our new monitoring officer, Emma Duncan, also welcome. So, item number 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Rhiannon, could you please report any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Dupre, who will be substituted by Councillor Swatter.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? There being none, we then move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the meeting held of the committee on the 27th of September 2022. Can I ask if members are happy to agree the minutes of that meeting? Yes? Can't remember. I take that as a yes. So I shall sign them as a true record of the meeting. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item number 3, and I would like to invite Democratic Services Manager, Mrs. Rowe, to present the report. Michelle. Thank you, Chair.
I have a number of changes in front of you for consideration and recommendation to the next meeting of full council. The first one is the Officers' Code of Conduct. You may remember at Council in 2022, it was agreed that the Officers' Code of Conduct will be incorporated within the Council's constitution, and you will see that it's set out in Appendix 1. Internal Audit have also looked at this, and they've identified a number of issues for us to consider, including when they've clarified when we should actually require officers to make declarations, which you see is set out in 2.13. Moving on to Staffing and Appeals Committee and the appointment of Council's leadership team roles, the committee met on the 23rd of February, and I think Councillor Reynolds was actually at the committee.
As a new member, Councillor C, I realise you are still struggling with the technology. Are you all set? Are you all set? Mrs. Rowe.
Good. I think Councillor Reynolds was at the Staffing and Appeals Committee meeting, I think on the 23rd of February, where a report was presented regarding the need to clarify and redefine the scope of the committee's responsibility in relation to senior appointments. And you'll see in 2.2.2 that it's proposed that the committee focuses on statutory key roles, which are all listed there. And this lines up with the recent changes to the council's leadership and the need to expedite appointments accordingly. I should stress that doesn't mean that councillors won't be involved in appointments below those statutory roles. There are stakeholder panels and councillors will be kept as part of the recruitment process, just not the final interview process. So if I now move on to decision-making principles, this is quite a nice, quick, easy one. Basically, we put the title in, but we also need to put what the principles are. So that's what we've done. And you'll see in 2.3.2, the principles are listed. Moving on to a more meatier item in relation to the Audit and Accounts Committee. And I noticed that the chair of Audit and Accounts Committee is seated here in the meeting. The committee reviewed its terms of reference and it's made some recommendations at a meeting on the 9th of February to actually change those, and you'll see they're set out in the document. And finally, the scheme of delegation. Some changes have been made that were agreed previously, but the whole point of this item is that in our constitution, we do, as a council, have a requirement to approve the scheme of delegation at our annual meeting every year, and that's why this section is included. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. So members, what I suggest that we do is to go through each small Roman numeral at recommendation A for an opportunity to ask questions. So the first item is the revised version of the Officers' Code of Conduct. Do we have any questions or comments on that? No. We then move on to the amendments resulting from the Staffing and Appeals Committee, which is attached at Appendix 2. Councillor Slatter.
Thank you, Chair. 1.1 in that table, little b. Oh, no, sorry, I've slipped. I do apologise. 1.1, it's from memory. The officers are when applying for employment here, are expected to declare all people that they know who are involved. I must get the text up. It's 1.1. And I was a little concerned that that is very all-embracing. And perhaps too comprehensive. See what you think of it. I know you know the wording. It's 1.1.
Councillor Slash, are you referring to the Staffing and Appeals Committee, or are you referring to the
Yes.
Code of Conduct?
Sorry, I thought it's 1.1 in the Staffing Appeals.
Okay.
Where I highlighted something that concerns me. Yes, on page 19, 1.1 Roman 1, they have to state in writing the name and job title of any relative, friend or acquaintance employed by Cambridge County Council. That is when applying for appointment. And I just wanted to know whether there's any limitation on the officer roles involved, because if that's everybody applying for work here and who would qualify for the name of an officer, that is a bit of concern. And also, would that apply to those who are already employed by the county council but are applying for a different role within that, in which case I should jolly well hope they have got lots of contacts with members of the Cambridge County Council. That's a trouble, just troubles me. I wondered how that might be used. Thank you. Sorry about the delay in
I
explaining
think,
myself.
Chair, it might be best if I defer to the Chief Executive on this one.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, the statement is actually a standard one that would be applicable in most local authorities. The provisions concerned are to prevent any canvassing or lobbying, which may otherwise bias or skew an appointment process. The County Council's recruitment and selection policy for all employees, not merely the chief officers or statutory officers that these conditions apply to, would also require the same declarations. That's perfectly standard practice across the public sector, and particularly within local government, that requirement to declare any parties involved. It's to prevent conflicts of interest primarily, in my view, but in some circumstances there have been cases in other authorities where canvassing directly of members of appointment panels has taken place by individuals known to them. So those provisions are there to protect us and to protect applicants for roles, and are standard provisions across local government. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Slatter, are you happy?
Not entirely. I can accept that it is a standard phrase, but I think it can put people in a difficult position if they are well embedded in their own neighbourhood. They know their local councillors, and hopefully the local councillors know them. The word acquaintance in there is such a nebulous one that it does trouble me. I mean, in this council, we have got a policy of place-based care and services rendered locally as much as possible. And if it really is not a problem, I'm quite prepared to take a chief executive's advice on this, but just voice that concern that maybe it needs a footnote when you're actually sending out the forms for interview for people who may not realise it's a standard.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Slatter for the comments. Again, I would just reaffirm that when people are applying for roles with the County Council, there is a standard declaration paragraph that clarifies and codifies these requirements. So it makes clear to job applicants why we're asking them to do this and for what purpose, not merely in terms of potentially influencing employment decisions, but it may relate to things such as contractual matters or awards of financial sums to bodies in the community. So there are a range of reasons for requiring these declarations that are both suitable and appropriate, and fundamentally come back to the Nolan principles of standards in public life. So I think I would just reassure Councillor Slatter, these are provisions I've seen in place for well over 20 years now. They work well. We don't have any particular problems or restrictions from a county council perspective in this regard. The statement included here is particularly applicable to chief officers or statutory officers of the county council. So the broader content that Councillor Slatter may be interested in will be contained in the council's recruitment and selection policy. Very happy for us to circulate the relevant excerpt for information following today's committee, if that's useful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Slatter, again, are you reassured?
I'm afraid not, because I think it might put people off applying for some of the jobs that we want to fill, but I hope I'm wrong.
Judging by the Chief Executive's head shake, I think you may be. Would it be useful to have the relevant information circulated as offered by the Chief Executive?
No, thank you. I appreciate the offer, but it's more a matter of the atmosphere when somebody's applying for perhaps one of our more minor roles or things we think of as minor. Thank you.
Thanks. Right, well, you've taken us on really to the next item, which is small Roman 3, the amendments to Chapter 4-6 Officer Employment Procedure Rules attached at Appendix 3. Does anybody have any other questions on that? In which case I will move on to the inclusion of decision-making principles in Article 12 decision-making as set out in Section 2.3 of the report. Any comments or questions? Everyone happy with those as well? They all seem very straightforward and sensible. And then lastly, the amendments to agreed by the Audit and Accounts Committee. Councillor Sieff.
Good morning. Sorry for my intervention, unplanned intervention before. As you say, Chair, I am new to this committee. So almost certainly I'm going to ask something that's pretty dumb and stupid and has possibly been looked at previously. I'm sure it has. I'm also a member, or will be a member, of the Audit and Accounts Committee, and I haven't yet sat on a committee meeting. So again, the question I'm about to pose may sound a little dumb. I've looked through the summary of functions, and which is obviously the instructions that would be given to internal audit and external audit. And I see that certainly we would be overseeing and ensuring that all expenditure transactions are properly authorized and supported by evidence and all the other good things that auditors usually do. But there are some words that I'm surprised are not there. You want to tell me that they are, or they're hidden there somewhere. But I would normally expect the audit committee to be asking their auditors, both internal and external, that there's compliance with the council's policies. I see words that say review compliance with relevant standards, codes of practice, and corporate governance principles, and that is good. But I would also expect to see a comment on compliance with the council's policies. And I would actually also expect to see not only non-compliances with council policy, but if the auditors felt that the policies themselves, for example, had an impact, perhaps an adverse impact at some time in the future. So sustainability, for example. So there may be short-term policies that do one thing, but longer term, there may be adverse impacts. I would also expect my auditors to be commenting on that as well. Now, I can give you an example. I won't at the moment. I just want to test whether my observation is valid.
Thank you for that. I would have thought that small g does in fact cover what you're asking, but as we do have the chair of the Audits and Accounts Committee here, perhaps I could ask Councillor Wilson to come forward and give us the benefit of his views.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the question, Councillor Seif. I'm not Tom Sanderson, if that's what appears on the screen. I agree entirely. I think that item C in G on page 24, including review compliance with relevant standards code of practice, does, in other words, cover the issues about policies. But I would also refer you to earlier functions in B, which talks about non-financial performance, and D, which talks about assurance statements. So although it is not specifically mentioned as ensuring that we are checking policy statements, that is certainly the intention of internal audit and external audit when they do their work as well. But happy to clarify anything further.
Thank you. We are also joined on Zoom by our internal audit officer, Richard Stringer. I wonder if you would like to make any comments on the question asked.
Certainly, Chair, thank you. Yes, basically to reiterate what's already been said, the wording in the terms of reference would include a review of policies and procedures. We will occasionally do pure compliance audits against established policies and established controls. We will on occasion, where we are reviewing policies and procedures, review those policies and procedures against the relevant legislation. And if we identified any gaps, we would report that. We would also, if we identified any potential efficiency gains that could be changed by amendments to policies or key control processes, we would recommend those in our work as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ms. Duncan, do you have anything to add?
Just very briefly, Chair, I'd just like to add that also through the annual governance statement, all officers sign a statement of assurance to say that there's compliance within their area, and that forms part of the preparation of the annual governance statement, which I think is coming up at a meeting, which is the most exciting part, I think, of the Audit and Accounts Committee work. So that's where we get the compliance, and you'll see throughout the audit programme where we think there are problems, the auditors will be directed to that, particularly with compliance. So hopefully that will give you some reassurance around that point.
Councillor Seif, you've had great experts now. Are you happy with the response, or do you have a follow-up question?
Well, of course, this is what I expected to hear, and I'm glad to hear it, of course. As I say, I've asked this possibly out of ignorance of procedures, but it was the words, probably what I wanted to see were words that explicitly said, please tell us that our expenditure is in line with the policies that have been set by the council and its committees. Those words are not there explicit. I agree that what you have said does cover that. Well, I'm not asking for a change of words, but that's the reason that I asked the question.
Thank you for that. And we'll follow your career in the Audit and Accounts Committee with considerable interest. Right, thank you for those. Those are all of the proposed changes to the Constitution that we are asked to recommend to full council. On the agenda, item number 3, have a part B, which is also to recommend to council that it agrees the scheme of delegation or such part of it as the Constitution determines it is for council to agree, as set out in part 3D of the Constitution. Mrs. Rowe, did you want to have anything to add to that?
Yeah, but this is literally the requirement for the annual meeting. So you're required each year to do this. And rather than take a separate report to full council, it makes sense to encompass it within the Constitution and Ethics report.
So members, are we happy with all of those recommendations to full council? Yes, thank you very much indeed. In which case we now move on to the next item, which is item number 4, the independent person's remuneration. Mrs. Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. This item is not dissimilar from your own allowances. And basically, the problem has arisen with the fact that you've set an increase based on a percentage increase of a certain staffing level. And of course, what actually happened is that staff didn't receive a percentage increase. They received an increase of just under £2,000. So therefore, it makes it very difficult to bring in such an increase because it would absolutely distort what is being paid at the moment. So therefore, what we're proposing is that we adopt the same process that we did for members' own allowances. We ask the IRP to look at it and they come up with a recommendation, and we suggest that we use the same recommendation for increasing the allowance for the independent person.
Lovely, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Any questions? Any comments? Are we happy to agree the recommendation? Yes, good. Thank you very much. So that is agreed, in which case we move on now to the next item, which is item 5, the review of complaints received under the Members' Code of Conduct. Could I invite our new Service Director, Legal and Governance, Emma Duncan, to represent the report? Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for such a nice welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council. This is a standard report that you see every time we meet. It identifies the complaints received under Code of Conduct and the current position in relation to each, and those are in front of you today. What I would say is that moving forward, I think we probably need to be changing the format of the report. Certainly, it's useful for members to see trend analysis, where complaints are coming from, who in terms of groups, who they're about, what type of thing generally a complaint's about, so that you can then decide whether any action is needed. And I think that will be a good thing for the committee moving forward. You'll be able to see if there are any particular problem areas with the Code of Conduct. And I think that leadership setting going into the election period, because obviously we're 2 years from an election and it will start next year, is really important from the committee's perspective. Because if there are any issues, they will usually come out just before the election. And as the monitoring officer, I'd like those to be resolved well in advance from that. So I think that moving forward, we will be showing you more trend analysis. You will still have the level of detail that you need, but also it will give you some information on action that you can take if we start to see an uptick in complaints or issues in certain areas. And obviously that's up to you guys to provide that leadership together with the group leaders, really, and that discipline from the group leadership perspective is really, really important as well. So I'm happy to go in to the complaints. Obviously, I can't provide lots of detail because there's lots of personal data involved there, but I think that moving forward, it should help you to have that trend analysis.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sieff, you have a question.
I do. Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this is another possibly dumb question, but on the basis that I always say that the only dumb question is the one that's not asked, I'm going to ask it just the same. New to this council, I wonder what constitutes a complaint, and I'm particularly concerned because as a new man in, I'm getting a lot of emails from residents, and my concern is not being able to answer them in time or to actually be able to give an answer. So is, lateness or inability to give an answer or to respond a complaint, a cause for complaint in itself? And in particular, of course, we are in an election period, as you say, we're getting a lot of round robin emails, which are not necessary from residents in our divisions. And I know it sounds silly, my gut instinct is not to answer them, but I mean, would that generate a complaint? So
thank you. I think we've got that. Emma?
That's such an interesting question, isn't it? In terms of a complaint has to be in writing to the monitoring officer for it to be a complaint under the Code of Conduct, and it has to breach one of the elements of the Code of Conduct. My view as the monitoring officer is your electorate will judge your performance as a member at the ballot box.
True.
It's not my job to judge that. I deal with ethical complaints that clearly breach the code of conduct. So in the past, as I've been the monitoring officer for a reasonable period of time now, I do receive complaints from the members of the public that the member concerned hasn't been a bit tardy in their response or hasn't told them what they would like to hear. Those aren't complaints that I deal with. Sometimes I receive complaints about members not going to parish meetings, parish council meetings as well. Those are, if they are anything, a group issue. So they're not for the monitoring officer, and we don't assess those.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter.
Thank you. I think it's absolutely appropriate you're looking to trends and to guide us in those, but I might also want to affirm that these are individual people, and the devastating effect of having a complaint made against you, especially as it comes from an authority outside Cambridgeshire, in effect, because we do it at arm's length. I want to be assured that if it has been resolved and the complainant has said no, that they're not going to take any further action, the person being complained about should definitely be told that. They should not be left hanging, wondering, because it is a stressful thing to have happen. I'm sure you do, but I speak for people here. I want to be assured. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slatter. Emma.
Yes, I think it's an incredibly stressful experience for members, and I don't think we can underestimate that. So we're moving forward we've got processes in place that absolutely ensure that once a complaint comes in, a member is consulted on it, so they get the opportunity to see it and respond to it immediately. I then assess the complaint with the independent person, and in most cases it's a no further action, there's no breach. And at that point, a decision notice goes out to the complainant and the subject member to show them the basis of that decision making. One of the things about trends, I think, is that you will see that some of these are quite elderly on here, these complaints, and I think that we need to truncate the time between the complaint coming in and a decision being notified, because the longer you leave it, actually the more worrying it is for members and more dissatisfied the complainant gets. So actually, if we can get that shorter, much shorter, within weeks, 4 weeks should really be a turnaround for a complaint. Unless it requires an investigation, we should make that process a lot easier. There are some complaints where it is clearly not going to go forward, but I need to assess it. We need to give the complainant a response. I will contact the member and try and reassure them and say, from my perspective, this hasn't got legs, because I think that can be quite helpful. But members do need to respond to complaints. It's really, really important. Like, I am the independent person here, the members' side of it, before making a decision. So we have got processes that protect members' involvement in that. But I think that what will be really helpful is if we can shorten the time between the receipt of the complaint and the issue of decision notice.
Thank you for that. Happy?
Yes, that is reassuring that you're aware of passage of time going slower for the person being complained about, and that they do get a definite, this is the end of it message. Is good. Thank you. Thank you
for that. Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome the suggestion to have the trend analysis. This is perhaps something that we can't really put in the report because it will know who the complaint is against, but it would be really interesting, at least internally, to know whether complaints are targeted to specific functions. So, for example, leader, deputy leader, leader of the opposition, and perhaps, the chair of the council. So it would be really interesting to see whether there's specific targeted complaints towards a function rather than the person itself, or whether they're more kind of personal issues involved. I really welcome the comments around timing. I was going to ask what is the range of timing on the complaints, because I noticed that some people do get back. So of course you do need to get the independent person involved. So I was wondering, I think it would be helpful for the committee to see what the range is from kind of the shortest complaints to the ones that take a longer time as well. And finally, just as a comment, because I know there will be some discussion around the debate, not hate plan of action after the motion in the future. So I was wondering if we can look at this holistically as part of the debate, not hate action plan, because some complaints, as we know, can be motivated by, for example, someone can be receive some other, perhaps some harassment that could end up in some sort of complaint, or it could be part of like a kind of like a broader package in a way. So I was wondering if that could be looked at part of our debate not hate discussion as well in terms of how we manage this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Emma?
Thank you very much for those questions. In terms of the debate not hate issue, that's coming back as an action plan for our next meeting. I think that will be really useful for members to see. And I think that in terms of the code of conduct, it can't be used as a tool to silence members in terms of their political views. As long as members express the political views appropriately, it shouldn't be used as a tool to do that. And sometimes it is. So that's where we're trying to get complaints dealt with quickly, give members reassurance about what will be taken forward and what won't be taken forward. And I think it will give, in terms of that trend analysis, you can see where the complaints are coming from. At previous authorities, it's been really illuminating to see, because we split it into groups, to see where the complaints are coming on and enable the groups to reflect on that as well in terms of how we use the complaint process, because it's not intended that be used as a tool to silence members in terms of how they express themselves at debates within certain boundaries. And I think that we need to give a very clear message to the council around that. It's there to deal with the most serious breaches of the code where behaviour falls below the standards that we collectively expect. So I think that that will be an excellent discussion point there. I look forward to the committee's thoughts on that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I have a question, and it relates to one of the complaints where we are told that the deputy monitoring officer determined it was more of a concern for the subject member, and that they are therefore in liaison with the subject member to ascertain whether any further support is required. And I haven't ever seen anything like this in relation to a report, because this. So what I'd like to ask is there, in the same way that there is a process that we go through when a complaint is made, is there a quick process that you go through in order to identify that there might be a subject member suffering, as it were, and that there is a process for dealing with that is quick?
Thank you very much. I think that in terms of a member welfare, it's something that Councillor Beulah and I have been discussing in relation to the motion. And we do have a range of information sessions, so information gathering tools. In terms of that, obviously we've got member services that will pick up if members are concerned, and they will talk to them and try and engage them if they have concerns about it, and then refer it on to people who are able to help. But in terms of our member welfare offer, I think that it will be helpful to discuss the motion in terms of strengthening that, because members do have access to our employee assistance programme. And I think that they would be, that's a good tool for them to use in respect of what we can offer. If we have concerns about members in particular, then provided the member concerned is happy for us to raise it, then they are raised with group leaders to make sure from a welfare and safeguarding perspective that we're picking up with members. And obviously we have conversations with members on a day-to-day basis just to check in that they're all right. And I think the one reflection, I suppose, that I have is that the political environment is becoming more toxic, and particularly over sensitive issues. And I think that we do need to reflect and make sure that members who are in particular roles sometimes are supported through that process. And that doesn't just mean in terms of group, but it means in terms of what support the council can offer as well. So yes, we do try and pick that up. If members have any concerns themselves, and this is something we probably need to do some work with the group leaders over, then we do have those facilities. And I think that will be brought to the fore in terms of what we discuss next time.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. Any other questions or comments in relation to the review of complaints received? We're asked to note the report that we have done. So we move on to agenda item 6, which is the Constitution and Ethics Committee agenda plan. Emma, Michelle, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I think we will probably need to, I think our next meeting's in June, and we probably will need to use that meeting because work is taking place on a couple of issues that will need to come before you.
I think we will definitely have the Debate Not Hate action plan back. I think that would be really good for members. We'll be doing that trend analysis on the constitution, on the ethical standards, and where we can improve that. We may have the governance review back as well at that point. So we will need to use that meeting date.
Splendid. Any questions on that item? In which case, it only remains for me to say, on behalf of myself and the Vice Chair, thank you to officers for your support over the last 2 years. We've had some interesting committee meetings discussing some fairly meaty items. Obviously, the composition of the committee will change at annual council, and I particularly would like to, from my own perspective, to say thank you for those members and officers who've participated over the last 2 years so loyally. If anybody has any questions, now's the time to ask them. Otherwise, I shall draw the meeting to a close, and thank you for your attendance this morning. Thank you.